You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Jerome Corsi, and we are very fortunate to have a repeat guest, Mike McCormick. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, Dr. Corsi. I'm good.
And we're going to review Mike's new book here, which just came out. It's called An Almost Insurmountable Evil: How Obama's Deep State Defied the Catholic Church.
Defiled
the Catholic Church, defiled the Catholic Church, and executed the Wuhan pandemic.
Right.
Okay, now we're going to focus first on the deep state and the Catholic Church. And I've been in touch with Archbishop Vigano, as I know you have as well, Mike.
Right.
And he is very much in support of this book.
Oh, good.
And the Archbishop has issued two things recently. He's issued a letter to American Catholics called in English, it's Against Spiritual Wickedness. And he's just issued an interview he did with Aldo Maria Valli in Italy, both of which address really the deep state and deep church.
Yeah.
So these two documents are really very relevant. I've emailed the Archbishop this morning, and what you've developed and what he has developed, I think, are going to make a very strong case to be brought to Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice and to Kash Patel, assuming he gets confirmed this week as head of the FBI.
Right.
And so I'm planning on making those introductions at the level of Donald Trump.
Oh, great.
So that we get Donald Trump's awareness of this, because Archbishop Vigano's letter to the American Catholics issued before the election did a lot to swing the Catholic vote to Donald Trump in the 2024 election.
Yeah.
And your work and the work we've done, together, the various podcasts we've done on your previous work have made a big impact, I think, overall on the vote and the awareness of the work the Archbishop has done. Now, to begin with, I want to have you go to the description here. I'm not sure where you want to start out, but I want to start out with there. We've got the cover of the book right there. I want to start out with the relationship of Archbishop McCarrick, because he's a central character in this whole drama. And Mike, if you would start out by explaining who Archbishop McCarrick is and why he's important, that might be a good way to begin the interview.
Right. So Theodore McCarrick was a Catholic priest ordained in the early 60s. He was from around New York City. And he then came down to Washington and went to college at Catholic University. I think he studied at Fordham, and then he went into the seminary, and then came and got like graduate programs at Catholic University in the early 60s, and was trained at Catholic University in fundraising. I think that's when he became affiliated with the intelligence community and basically was groomed as an intelligence community operative. His first assignment after Catholic University was in Puerto Rico. He opened a Catholic college down there. But at the time, this is the mid 60s, Puerto Rico the Caribbean was in a very sensitive political realm because of the Cuban Missile Crisis that just occurred. So, and I know this because I was born in St. Thomas in 1960. So my dad was a Coast Guard guy down there, and they did a lot of sort of CIA activities around the Caribbean. And one time a guy came in and talked to my dad, and he said, "Hey, listen," my dad was a captain of the Coast Guard ship there. He goes, "If you hear this code word over the radio, you shut down the harbor." And the code word came over the radio when Trujillo was assassinated in the Dominican Republic. So my dad shut down the harbor for a while, and they opened it up. So that was the CIA. And McCarrick goes into this, and he learns how to speak Spanish. Well, a little bit later than that, the CIA goes into Argentina with Operation Condor. And that's when they started reaching into the church there. They'd always used the church as sort of a networking process. He did it in Europe with the anti-communist activities, but they did it in Argentina and Brazil. And one of the priests they used was a guy named Bergoglio. When he was a priest in Argentina, he was affiliated with the right-wing dictatorship, who was backed by the CIA. So Bergoglio was known to these dictators. It's very controversial what he did then and what he didn't do then. Some of the priests who were sort of under his charge were kidnapped and tortured by the regime, and then released. And they blamed Bergoglio. They said he told on him, and he's the one that set him up. And he said, "No, I was trying to protect you guys." So it's always been a black mark in his history there.
Now, Bergoglio is Pope Francis today.
Bergoglio's Pope Francis today. And so his affiliation with the CIA may go back to that Operation Condor activity. So fast forward to McCarrick. McCarrick comes up through the ranks in the 90s. He's a pedophile. He's raping altar boys and seminarians as he moves up through the ranks of the church. There's a lot of complaints against him. They just fall on deaf ears. Why? Because he has big, powerful friends in powerful places. And he always is able to get his hands on a lot of money to distribute to people. Well, in the 90s, he becomes part of a State Department program to travel globally and distribute money around the world for the State Department. And it's always unclear who his benefactors are. He said they're wealthy Catholics, but frankly, in the book, I surmise that it's probably the CIA that's giving him money to travel around the world and pay out to these impoverished bishops and priests in different locales. So
let's just stop for a minute on this, because the CIA money we're now knowing has been distributed through U.S. aid, and that's another way that he could have been being paid.
That's right. There's a lot of USAID stuff behind this. So in 2000, he gets named to be the Archbishop of Washington. He moves from New Jersey to Washington. And in 2001, of course, he becomes the voice of comfort for Catholics around the world when the 9/11 attacks hit Washington. So he becomes very close with the Bush White House. And I was working in the Bush White House then. I started hearing all the time about Cardinal McCarrick. And I realized that he was a prominent guy. And then he was Archbishop, and then he became named Cardinal by Pope John Paul II. And then he moves up the ranks. He's very close with media in the city, very close with politicians, especially Democrats. Obama comes in, and the Obama White House reaches out to the Vatican through a guy named Dennis McDonough. And Dennis McDonough was a Catholic. He had two brothers who took holy orders. One is still a Catholic priest in Minneapolis, although he's kind of been disgraced because he was accused of covering up for pedophile priests, and they demoted him from a higher up position in the diocese to being a pastor of a parish. The other brother retired from the Catholic priesthood. So he's got one brother still a priest, one brother retired.
I want to read something you wrote on page 30. You said that while Catholics made up a third of Obama's cabinet in 2012, Vatican conservatives led by Pope Benedict pushed back hard on Obama's liberal goals. They weren't impressed that Obama's Vice President Joe Biden, his Chief of Staff Bill Daley, his National Security Advisor Tom Donilon shared their Catholic faith. They saw Obama-led Democrats advancing pro-abortion policies, same-sex rights, and health and human service mandates to provide cost-free coverage for contraceptives, sterilizations, and, quote, emergency birth control and employee health plans under the Affordable Care Act. So this started in the Obama administration. And in fact, there are various emails talking about the need to have a Catholic spring.
Right.
Emails were with John Podesta,
right,
and especially with this Donahue, who was advanced to a more prominent position in the Biden administration, that the whole idea was that the Catholic Church ought to be penetrated by progressives, and by this
That's what,
time,
right.
by this
That's
time,
what
the
Podesta
LGBT
was
agenda.
saying.
Yeah,
But, McDonough was already doing it. McDonough started doing this penetration before Obama even got into Washington. He reached out to Podesta. McDonough and Podesta had an email between each themselves in 2008, right after the election, to reach out to the Vatican and reach out to Pope Benedict. So they started doing that, but they wanted to push Benedict out of the way because of his conservative obstruction of their very progressive ideas.
and of course, McCarrick, who was not only having sex with the altar boys, he was inviting seminarians to join him in retreats or in vacations and sleeping in the beds with them and having sex with the seminarians. So adult homosexuality as well.
Right. And McCarrick at this time is traveling to China regularly. He's traveling to Iran regularly. This is in the 2000s, from early 2000 through 2013. So in 2012, there's a series of very suspicious trips that he takes to Buenos Aires right before Pope Benedict resigns. Right before then, McCarrick goes down to Buenos Aires.
In fact, you say one of the reports written in the Catholic Church, this Parolin report, confirmed a McCarrick Bergoglio meeting in Buenos Aires in August 2011.
Right,
and
2011.
And a previous one in 2004. So
Yes.
that McCarrick was in communication with Bergoglio in Argentina, and there's good reason to believe that Bergoglio was affiliated and McCarrick affiliated with the CIA both at that time. Now,
Right.
if Bergoglio was working for the regime at that time, the regime in Argentina was more of a military coup d'état, and they were killing communists and Catholics in Argentina, intellectuals. So Bergoglio seems to have shifted his orientation with McCarrick to the left,
Right.
as they both have embraced this LGBT agenda and wanted to put it into the church. Is that correct?
Yeah. And there's a very interesting movie put out by Hollywood called The Two Popes. That came out in the fall of 2019 and was nominated for Academy Awards. It starred Anthony Hopkins and Jeremy Price as Pope Francis and Pope Benedict, sort of exploring a fictional friendship and how one pope stepped aside for the other pope. And it was based, in my opinion, it was a CIA propaganda film done in conjunction with Hollywood to set up Bergoglio and Pope Francis as this benevolent force of good. What the CIA did and what Obama did with Pope Francis, what his whole role, most of his role in this papacy for them was what I call morality laundering. They had political, they used him as a foreign policy tool. They used the Vatican to bless with morality laundering the child trafficking, human trafficking, drug smuggling done out of Central America that was hidden by the illegal immigration surge. They did it with the Iranian nuclear deal. They used Pope Francis directly for that. And same with McCarrick. The two of those traveled together to the Holy Land to help sell Obama's nuclear deal, Iran nuclear deal. And then they also use them to betray the Chinese Catholics in China from 2014 on, basically all the way through until 2018 when they were, the Vatican signed this really poor agreement with the Chinese Communist Party to cede control of the Catholic Church in China to the party. So they betrayed China's Catholics. And so all this happens under Bergoglio and McCarrick. And So this is what's in the book, is the details on that.
Also, the Council of the Bishops in the United States have been supporting this immigration, welcoming these immigrants, and what Vigano has documented is that they've gotten almost in 1 year $2.4 billion from the Biden administration,
Right.
To support the illegal immigrants coming into the United States, and what Vigano called it's an ethnic substitution plan. In other words, to bring in all of these Hispanic-speaking people in order to change the culture of the United States to move it in a leftist direction.
Right. The Great Reset, they call it.
The Great Reset, part of the Great Reset.
Yeah.
And at the center of this agenda there's two things. One is the LGBT agenda, and trying to make this, like liberation theology, a message of Jesus Christ, that we have to reach out to the poorest among us and to the marginalized. We've got to create through this meeting of the synods, this meeting of the bishops with the local congregations all around the world, Catholics, to say we've got to make a place for the LGBT in the church, which is again contrary to the traditional Catholic teaching that, there's only two genders, male and female, and marriage is a sacrament between a man and a woman to procreate children and raise them in a moral education, believing in Jesus Christ. Whereas here, so you've got all these.
Right. And Archbishop, I'm glad you brought up Archbishop Vigano's name, because he plays a really important role in this. So he comes to America as the papal nuncio in the 2000s. And he starts to see all this activity, these complaints against McCarrick, and confronts him a couple of times. And McCarrick is a slippery character with big friends behind him. That's why I think he's a CIA guy. He has the arrogance of a deep state operative. And so he is sort of reprimanded about these activities. Pope Benedict says you have to just lead a life of quiet, seclusion. Don't be involved with people. And McCarrick ignores him and keeps doing all this travel program. And when Francis comes in, McCarrick is unleashed, and that was part of this whole, operation to get Bergoglio named Pope Francis. Was it unleashes McCarrick, and McCarrick goes around the world as Bergoglio's connection into the Washington higher-ups, especially in the White House, because he would go directly into the White House from 2013 on and talk to White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough. McDonough got named White House Chief of Staff in 2013, and I think a large part of that was because he did this operation to get Pope Francis into the Vatican. And so they have McCarrick as an operative directly into the heart of the White House, the Obama-Biden White House. And they're going around the world and they're setting up these foreign policy initiatives. And so Archbishop Vigano in 2013, in June, actually it might have been 2014. I think it was 2013, either June 2013 or 2014. He travels to Rome and sees McCarrick there. And he knows that he and McCarrick have crossed paths, and he says, oh, they just sort of see each other going to the, and McCarrick goes, oh, I'm on my way to China. I just had an audience with the Pope. And so the Pope sees Archbishop Vigano, and he asks him about McCarrick. What do you think about McCarrick? And Archbishop Vigano tells him there is a folder, very thick folder about his activities, defiling seminarians, in the Vatican, the investigations area. And the Pope just sort of shrugs it off because, Archbishop Vigano didn't realize McCarrick was working with Pope Francis then. They were friends. And so he was basically sounding him out to see what he thought. And once he realized he didn't like McCarrick, all of a sudden Archbishop Vigano was put in a special relationship with the Vatican where he was not allowed to do things, and he had to become a whistleblower. He becomes the whistleblower of the Vatican, not only of McCarrick, but of Bergoglio and all the other ugly activities that are going on in there. And that's the role that Archbishop Vigano rises to in 2018. He writes a series of letters after McCarrick gets outed. The Catholic Church actually kind of, I think what happened was when Trump gets elected in 2016, and he takes office in 2017, the church realized, the CIA realized they had to cover up what they were doing with this church affiliation. And they silenced McCarrick. They put him out to pasture, and he wasn't excommunicated, but he was laicized, so he could no longer be a priest he's basically, and they ran this, they did a huge report on him. It took a long time for them to write it up. Cardinal Parolin was the guy who was in charge of it. He was the Secretary of State. Well, it was a whitewash. Basically, they wrote about things that were documented in there, but not everything. So those trips that McCarrick took to Buenos Aires, they appear as sort of he was traveled there, but they don't really explain it. There's no real discussion of who he met down there or what he did there. It's just sort of a footnote. Oh, by the way, he went to Buenos Aires in October of 2012 and December of 2012, just months before Pope Benedict retires. And McCarrick just happened to be in Rome in February 2013 when Pope Francis, when it was time to set up the conclave. So he was there when this happened, and he started sort of influencing cardinals and bishops at that time with media presentations, things like that. But also all along the way, remember, he's been the guy who's traveled around the world and handed out money by the hundreds of thousands of dollars to people. And so when it came time for the conclave, people that owed him a favor, if he wanted Bergoglio to be nominated, he could push that button behind the scenes. This is how the CIA operates. They buy their way with influence.
Also, you were at the White House as a stenographer for many years, and you worked and traveled with Joe Biden. Much of what you're talking about, you saw firsthand. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I never met McCarrick in person. I would hear Joe Biden all the time talking about at a private residence reception that he had. There's Cardinal McCarrick in the back. McCarrick was basically a spiritual advisor. And, the reason I started even looking into this was I was on a podcast with Alex Jones, and I was listening to his show. He was talking about this feeling of overwhelming evil that he was experiencing. This was last spring, so spring of 2024. And I was thinking to myself, what's the most evil thing from the White House that I remember? And it was that Joe Biden had this close spiritual relationship with this pedophile, Cardinal McCarrick. And so when I looked into what Cardinal McCarrick did in the White House with the White House visitor logs, that's when all this became apparent. Now,
let's focus on the deal that was engineered with Honduras.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of the most evil of the deals first of all, you're laying the ground for investigation by Pam Bondi of the Justice Department and Kash Patel, assuming he gets confirmed, head of the FBI, into a CIA conspiracy to change the Pope, to have a coup d'etat against Pope Benedict to put in Bergoglio, knowing that Bergoglio has now adopted this progressive LGBT agenda and is moving towards a communist interpretation of immigration, namely that we have to take care of the least of all of these. And the Catholic Church has to reach out in sympathy to the marginalized members of the Catholic Church, namely the LGBT Catholics. Now, you found under McCarrick's direction a deal that McDonough put together with Biden involving Honduras. Can you explain what that deal was about?
Right. So in the summer, in 2014, spring, summer, all of a sudden, all these unaccompanied parentless children show up at the southern border, and they cross in illegally and are brought into the United States. It becomes a crisis, the crisis of unaccompanied minors, and they're brought there by cartels. All families in Central America and Mexico are letting their kids, paying cartels to take their kids to the border. And these are young kids, some as young as 4. Most of them are between 13 and 17. Most of them are boys. The crimes committed against these kids is just awful by the cartels, by the coyotes and the cartels. How did they get there? We don't know. Who told them to go there? Was it the CIA? Was it the Catholic Church? Was it the government? Who told them that this was okay? We don't know. To this day, no one's really looked into it. Obama and those guys never looked into it. So all these guys show up, and Joe Biden has to be the guy that solves the crisis. Well, he uses Cardinal McCarrick, and they set up a series of meetings in the White House with McCarrick and McDonough after Joe Biden has met in person there with the president of Honduras, a guy named Juan Orlando Hernandez. Juan Orlando Hernandez and his brother at the time were smuggling cocaine in the United States by the ton. And the Biden administration and the Obama Biden people knew it because they were caught on a DEA surveillance tape. The brother of Juan Orlando Hernandez was talking about it. And so they had surveillance. They knew about it. The intelligence streams that go into the White House are so detailed. The DEA would have told somebody, and somebody would have told somebody else until it got into the White House. Hey, you're going to have this Honduras president coming into the White House for a meeting about these unaccompanied minors. He's smuggling cocaine in the United States by the ton. They would have told him that, and they didn't care. So they bring this guy in, they make a deal, and then they turn the Catholic Church on to the deal through McCarrick and McDonough. And that's when they bring in Catholic Relief Services, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops,
and the Alliance for Prosperity,
and the eventual policy. It's Joe Biden's pet project is called the Alliance for Prosperity. They send $1.5 billion from 2014 through 2016 to 3 tiny Central American countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And they know the guys in Honduras are smuggling drugs in. And so where did the money go? What was it used for? I think it was used to set up child trafficking and drug trafficking networks with the cartels. The Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo, was a major contributor to Juan Orlando Hernandez's presidential campaign in 2013 when he was elected. So all this is happening all at the same time. Honduras guy gets elected. He's with the cartels. All these unaccompanied minors show up at the border. They have a crisis. They've got to solve it. They go to Congress. They get all this money. They throw it to these small little countries, and they're doing it with cartels, and they're using the church networking in there. And Pope Francis and Cardinal McCarrick knew it the whole time. Pope Francis allowed the Catholic Church to be brought into a business deal with cartel devils. He sold the church out to cartel devils. That's what he did.
And you're talking basically about the Catholic Church, the Biden administration, undoubtedly the CIA, which they're all tied together under. McDonough in the White House as chief of staff for Biden, engineering a deal with the Honduras president, which would allow cocaine, in fact, money coming into this to the Catholic bishops, as well as through the Alliance for Prosperity to the Central American countries, to allow setting up a network for bringing cocaine into the United States across the border, and for stealing children that would end up ultimately in sex trades in the United States or around the world. I mean,
that's right. And so this is 2014, 2016. And what happens? Donald Trump happens. Donald Trump gets elected and says, I'm putting up a border wall. And that blows up the whole Great Reset deal. This is the Alliance for Prosperity was the seed money for the Great Reset. And Donald Trump stepped right in front of it when he was elected. And so they had to figure out a way around him. So they got rid of McCarrick and they started plotting and planning. Okay, we've got to, get Joe Biden back in. That's what we have to do. And that's what led to Joe Biden becoming the illegitimate president in 2020.
So the 2020 election, again, stolen in order to make sure that Donald Trump did not get a second term. And this whole Alliance for Progress, Trump never did stop during his first term, did he?
What Trump did is, so part of what happened was the general who was in charge of Southern Command was General John F. Kelly. Well, he becomes the
chief of staff.
The Secretary of Homeland Security.
Right.
So he's in charge of the border when Trump comes in 2017. This is the deep state putting in their guys around Trump. Trump didn't really know what was going on. So he comes in and he is very close with Juan Orlando Hernandez in Honduras. He was down there a lot with him. And so when he comes in, he tells Trump, I'm going to tell them to restrict their immigration. They're going to cut back on the illegal immigrants out of Honduras. So Trump cuts the funding. He cuts the Alliance for Prosperity funding in half. And the Hondurans are like, okay, we'll play ball with you. So for 2 years they did. But then in 2018, in the midterms, the Democrats win that election and take over the House. And they start impeachment process against Trump. And what does Trump do right after that election? He arrests Juan Orlando Hernandez's brother, Tony. And that's when all the information about what really happened with the drug smuggling comes out of that trial. And that trial takes place in the fall of 2019 as Trump is getting impeached for the beautiful phone call and as Wuhan pandemic is being rolled out in China. Trump is under impeachment. Tony Hernandez, no one pays attention to this trial.
It's a trial for the Ukraine, for the phone call about...
Yes, that was the impeachment. And the trial is Tony Hernandez. Trump says, you guys are gonna pay for all the smuggling you did. So as he's being put on trial, guess who gets thrown out of the White House? General John F. Kelly, White House Chief of Staff, is out of a job. And he's been bitter about it ever since. He insults Trump about his relations with military people ever since. So Kelly was a deep state operative. And part of it was this Alliance for Prosperity that he was overseeing. He was allowing that drug smuggling to go through as the chief. He was a commanding general of Southern Command, which was in charge of South America. And
so Kelly did not stop the drug trade and the child trade. It was still ongoing. And as Biden got into president in 2020, it started ramping up. But the point I want to make is that Kelly not only got moved inside the White House as chief of staff, but when he left the White House, fired out of the White House, he continued to support in 2020, in the run-up to the November election, when you had Black Lives Matter and Antifa burning down cities, and including Washington, D.C., St. John's Episcopal Church across from Lafayette Park and the White House was under siege and partially burned. Trump appeared in front of it with a Bible, and Trump was blamed for the riot. But General Kelly supported General Milley in saying that if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act, they would neither one of them be in favor of following the order to send troops into the United States to put down these violent protests going on. So he basically insubordinate.
Yeah, right. I mean, General John F. Kelly was given aid and comfort to our enemies, the cartels. That's treason. And
it's
so
treason.
So was Miller.
Well, and so is what Biden did, making this deal with Honduras and making in the Catholic Church, which is a combination now of what Archbishop Vigano calls the deep church complicity in these many crimes committed by the deep state worldwide. And among them are this fake pandemic and lockdown and the whole issue of what we're seeing in the Ukraine war. We're seeing in the corruption in Ukraine. We're seeing in the money coming, the children coming across the border, the drugs coming across the border. I mean, it's clearly 2011. I caught HSBC money laundering for the drug cartels in Mexico, and the CIA had to be part of that, as the Treasury and the National Security Agency did. They all monitor every wire transfer going on worldwide. And so therefore they had to be aware of the money laundering that HSBC was doing. And recently TD Bank just got fined $3 billion for involvement in drug smuggling activities worldwide. So again, the evil here that we're talking about, deep state, deep church, was at the heart of the Biden administration. Is that right? Is that, I mean, that's critical to what, and here's the book we're talking about, just published by Mike McCormick, An Insurmountable Evil. And the subtitle is How Obama's Deep State Defiled the Catholic Church and Executed the Wuhan Pandemic. We're covering the part today about the Catholic Church. And it seems to me that the evil in the Catholic Church was in league with the deep state, anti-God, traitorous deep state, CIA, and other State Department, other apparatus that was overthrowing legitimate rulers in Ukraine and destabilizing Ukraine into war, that was at our border, making deals with Honduras, etc., and China making deals that disadvantaged Christians.
Right. And it's not just the United States. I mean, Pope Francis came in and became the refugee pope. He did morality laundering for the migration of refugees into the United States across our southern border, but also all through Europe. So Europe is, all these terrible afflictions they're facing in Europe right now is because over 10 years ago, Pope Francis was elected and put in place to be the refugee promoting. We have to go out there and use the church and use our wealth to help the poor people and take care of them. And the CIA and the globalists in the World Economic Forum were behind it the whole time. And the everyday people, like, middle-class people who pay their taxes and expect safety, didn't get it. They haven't been getting it. And, Vice President Vance went over to the Munich Security Conference last week and did an amazing job confronting the Europeans on their breakdown in the just basic principles of free speech and, giving people the right to assemble and speak their minds about the problems in their communities. So this is a globalist thing, and the Vatican is morality laundering the whole thing. It's disgusting.
Well, the Pope just issued a letter saying it was a moral duty to receive these immigrants without revealing the billions of dollars in funding. I mean, the Catholic Church has been having to pay out huge amounts of money in the sex scandals of the priests. But again, the billions of dollars received to do this ethnic substitution scheme, Marxist scheme, being billed as a this immigration-friendly, woke, deep church, which is saying that, using, for instance, the Good Samaritan parable from Jesus to say that we have to help these immigrants come into the United States and welcome them without revealing how much of a money-making activity it is for the Catholic Church and how the real agenda is the destruction of the United States.
Yeah, that's right. And, Vice President Vance was interviewed with Fox News. Hannity interviewed him, Sean Hannity. And he talked about this concept that was called, he called it an old school Christian concept where first you take care of your family, then you take care of your community, then you take care of your fellow countrymen, and eventually you take care of foreign countrymen. You don't worry about the foreign people before you worry about, all these other sort of like rings of love. And so that's why Pope Francis had to reply with that letter and say, oh, no, it's not rings of love. It's, you have to understand if there's a stranger there, like the Good Samaritan, you have to take care of them. And so Pope Francis was directly refuting what Vice President Vance said. And, this is the Pope getting into politics in a way the Catholic Church should never be in politics. And he's right in the thick of it because they're dirty. The Pope has committed grave sins with his church and his papacy, and he has to confess in public to get to be able to cleanse his soul and the church.
Well, that's never going to happen, I don't think, because I think that they'll all be so deeply into this evil they'll never want to admit it.
Well, then we're going to have to do an investigation, and I think you're right. I think the American side of it, what the Americans did, what Obama, Biden, and McDonough is the guy that knows everything. McDonough is the White House chief of staff. He's not the president. He knows what was going on, and he can tell everything because he was the point man before he was White House chief of staff with McCarrick. He can tell you what McCarrick's background is. He can tell you what they knew about the cartels in Honduras and how they were involved. He can tell you all about why there was really a bunch of unaccompanied minors at the southern border in 2014. So Dennis McDonough is the guy who's got to come out and confess. I hope he does. The community, he's got a stature in the community. He's got a family. He should stand up and confess publicly to the sins that he knows he's committed as White House chief of staff, as a Democratic operative.
Right. Well, this letter that Pope Francis wrote to the bishops of the United States makes it seem like there is twisting Jesus Christ's life to saying that we have to support these migrants, and not in terms of without talking at all about, the drugs that have been imported, the children who have been sold into sex slavery, the evil side of this at all. He's saying it's, Christians know very well that it is only by affirming the infinite dignity of all that our own identity as persons and as communities reaches its maturity. So he's saying we have to take into and he says the true ordo amoris is what you're referring to.
Yeah, right.
The ordo, the order of love, that you eventually have to reach out to foreigners and immigrating and love them. He's basically that must be promoted, as we discover, by meditating constantly on the parable of the Good Samaritan. That is, by meditating on the love that builds a fraternity open to us without exception. Okay, now that's a fundamental perversion of what the Good Samaritan is all about. And, Christ is not teaching that we have to, the Good Samaritans, the Samaritans in ancient Judea were Bible reading, but they were in a sense in a schism where they refused to accept certain of the fundamental teachings of that time of Judaism. And there was hatred between the Samaritans and the Jews. And so the idea here was one of seeing past that hatred, but it was not one of, welcoming the Samaritans into Judea. That's not what Christ was talking about. It's a fundamental utilizing, and this is what liberation theology attempts to do. It attempts to make Jesus Christ appear to be on board with this social justice agenda.
Right. That's the morality laundering. That's what he was doing. Now he's still doing it. They brought him in to do it, and that's what he does. Morality laundering.
Yeah, and the fundamental fraud of this is that Christ's mission was to bring souls to God and to preach the kingdom to come. And so therefore, if you look at a Mother Cabrini who worked with immigrants, Italian immigrants to begin with in the late 1800s in the United States, what she was trying to do is establish their faith, to preserve the faith of the Italian Catholics in the United States, despite the hardships of what they were going through as immigrants, where they were not yet accepted. And so her mission was one of salvation, not that, we need to reach out to these immigrants and assimilate them into our society when it's fulfilling a Marxist agenda of, this ethnic substitution plan to change fundamentally the belief in Americans in the sanctity of the family and marriage being a sacrament between one man and one woman, to expand this LGBT idea, which fundamentally is the destruction of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, right. That's what they're working towards. It's disgusting. It's an almost insurmountable evil. And the election of 2024 is when we stopped it, because we put President Trump back in there, and he's revealing the corruption in the Catholic Church through the Doge revelations of the corrupt funding of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Catholic Relief Services, all the money that was stolen there and you kicked back to various people. And then, President Trump has also stood up and said, we're going to put an end to the border. We're going to put an end, and they've stopped illegal immigration cold, and now they're starting to send people back. And then he sends J.D. Vance over to Europe, and J.D. Vance basically tells the Europeans, you guys have to do the same thing to the leadership at the Munich Security Conference. And the leadership has to sit there and listen, because the people, the populist voice of the people, has been saying it over and over for the last, 2016 they had Brexit, in 2016 they elected Trump. So that's when the populist voice made itself known loudest, and the Vatican just pretended it didn't exist, and they knew better, but they don't know better. And Pope Francis, I pray that he recovers from his illness and recovers and confesses his sins and cleanses his soul and saves Jesus's church with a resignation and a public confession, so that everybody understands from him what he did, and that'll save his soul. And that's what I pray for.
Well, I admire your enthusiasm for that to happen. I'm doubtful. I think much more likely is going to be that we get this information and have Archbishop Vigano available to provide information and to assist criminal investigation of massive magnitudes that I would like to see the Trump administration engage in with Kash Patel.
Yeah,
because there are crimes, including treason here, that were committed. Doge is seeing the money aspects of it, and now we're about to see the deep state CIA involvement in it.
right.
And then that's going to be the complicity of our own government to be in the drug cartel business, in business with the drug cartels, and the United States government in business with the child sex traffickers, child pornography, and all the other crimes, as well as the LGBT agenda. And Trump is systematically ending this, non-binary sexual neo-Marxism from the schools, this gender change operations of our children. I think we're going to see a much more determined Trump administration in the second term to root out this evil. And I think it's not an almost insurmountable evil is a great typification of it, because the rooting out of an evil this entrenched is not going to be easy.
No, it's going to take a while.
And it's going to have to start with the education of the public. I think Archbishop Vigano is doing a great job. I think, Mike, you're doing a great job. I strongly recommend that this book, that everybody reads this book. It's just been published. Chris will show it to you there in better form so you can see it. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and all the other electronic sources. We're going to feature it on thetruthcentral.com. And Mike, we're going to do more interviews with you. There's much more in this book having to do with the Wuhan virus, having to do with China,
right?
Having to do with the core corruption of the Obama presidency that transitioned to an even greater magnitude of evil under Biden's administration. And this evil cannot be left unexposed, and we're resolved to expose it to the world and to track down these evil criminals, bring them to justice. So, Mike, we applaud you in your efforts, and we're going to do more interviews and encourage more people to buy and read your book.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Corsi.
God bless. We'll have you back. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and this is thetruthcentral.com. In the end, God always wins. God is going to win here too. And truth will prevail. I encourage everybody in spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, let's get on our knees and repent. We can see how much evil we allowed to be in the government and the Catholic Church. We need to ask God to forgive us. God will hear our prayer and heal our land. We need to act first. God will do the heavy lifting. God will handle this problem, provided that we're on the case to root out the evil. It's Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. We're doing podcasts every weekday on CorsiNation.com again. We'll hope you'll join us and spread the word about the program. God bless.